I gave up $10,000 of free Bitcoin because my security and peace of mind are more important. All right, here's the story. So back when I was selling all of the gold and silver that I had bought back in 2017, it just so happened that when the check hit, it hit during the very small time window when Coinbase was offering a bonus for any assets that you put on the Coinbase platform, that they would give you a 3% automatic bonus as long as you kept the assets on the platform for at least 2 years. Well, I was buying 6 figures worth of Bitcoin, and they were also offering, which they still do, that if you have at least $200,000 of digital assets or US dollars on the Coinbase platform, that they would give you a 4% Bitcoin back on the Bitcoin credit card, not the debit card, but the credit card, rather than the standard 2%, or if you have more than $10,000 of assets, 2.5%. So the difference when I calculated it, and you had to leave the assets on there for a full 2 years, so it was all the way until, November or I guess December or whatever it was of 2027, which was 2 years into the future as compared to when I was doing this, which I guess was December of 2025. I ran the math based on my spending habits, and the 3%, if I had left all of the Bitcoin on Coinbase that I had, the 3% would have added up, plus the 2% on the credit card, the additional 2% on everything I bought with the credit card, would have added up over the course of 2 years to more than $10,000. And I actually considered it. I mean, even though it's against all the advice I've ever given anyone, I actually considered it. And because as soon as, well, I'll tell you the rest of the story, but I considered it because I was like, $10,000, that's basically free. I mean, it's not just basically free, it literally is free Bitcoin. But again, you had to keep, I would have had to keep a balance on Coinbase of $200,000, and which meant keeping all of the Bitcoin that I bought with the gold and silver I bought on Coinbase, plus some extra. And again, I would have gotten the 4% rather than 2% Bitcoin back on the Bitcoin credit card. The reason I didn't, so first of all, I considered it. And I thought, while I'm considering it, just in the day or two I'm considering it, I will move it to Coinbase Vault. Because obviously I'm not going to sit there with $200,000 on Coinbase, just like sitting there where somebody can, walk up to me at a gas station and say, give me your Bitcoin and I could transfer $200,000. I'm never going to do that. It is ridiculous to have that much Bitcoin on your phone where it does not require something like Bitkey. Bitkey requires you to touch the Bitkey to the back of your phone, which obviously if you keep it in a safe deposit box at a bank or something like that, you can't do, and a hacker can't do, and a scammer can't do, and someone who holds you up in a gas station parking lot can't do either because you don't keep the Bitkey on your person. So I stuck it initially in Coinbase Vault, and I'm like, I'm going to think about this for a day or two. But Coinbase Vault only allows you to have your Bitcoin on Vault with a 48-hour unlock. And I don't want a 48-hour unlock. Like, my goal is for my Bitcoin to be inaccessible, to be very difficult to reach. Any meaningful amount of Bitcoin needs to be very difficult to reach. And I thought, look, if somebody holds me up in a gas station parking lot and says, give me your Bitcoin, and I say I can't, and they see that it's in Coinbase Vault, they're going to realize, oh, there's only a 48-hour unlock window. Well, we were planning to just hold you up in a gas station parking lot, but now it turns out if we hold you hostage for 48 hours, then the unlock period on Coinbase Vault expires, and then they can get the Bitcoin. I'm like, nope, I'm just not going to play that game. I am not going to play the game of having $200,000 sitting on Coinbase where it could, theoretically somehow still be hacked or scammed, even though Coinbase Vault does a very good job of keeping that from happening, at least from hackers and scammers. But I was like, I am not going to put myself in the position where when account data gets leaked, which happens all the time, somebody's like, ooh, he's got $200,000 sitting on Coinbase. No, I'm not going to keep balances. I'm not going to keep high balances on online services like Coinbase or River. I'm just not going to have high balances on there. I'm going to have very low balances with only the Bitcoin I need for transactional day-to-day spending, and everything else is going to be locked away, very hard to get to, in, periods of time that take way more than 48 hours. In other videos I've gone through, if you want to walk through, my thinking on that, I did a video on why you do not need to worry about being kidnapped for your Bitcoin. but I walk through how I think about that. So just do a keyword search on my YouTube channel for the word kidnap or something like that, and you can go watch that video. But anyway, I ultimately concluded, I'm like, I'm not playing this game. I am not playing this game of my Bitcoin's available within 48 hours, unlock. I'm not playing this game of if my information gets leaked online, they're going to know that $200,000 is in Coinbase. They're going to assume it's available. If somebody gets a hold of that, they're going to assume it's available. They're not going to know that it's in Coinbase Vault, which has a 48-hour unlock period. And I'm like, 48 hours unlock is not long enough anyway. I want there to have to be something that is, a major impediment to getting the Bitcoin, and just waiting 48 hours was not good enough. So as soon as I, thought about it for a day or two, I was like, nope, I'm not playing this game. I know I'm giving up $10,000 of free Bitcoin. I know that's what's happening, and I'm willing to do that because my peace of mind and my own security are such that I'm just not going to leave $200,000 on Coinbase. So I transferred it to cold storage from Coinbase Vault to cold storage, which is, my ultra secure that takes forever and is impossible to get a hold of under duress or under, in situations of armed robbery or, home invasion or kidnapping or hostage taking or all of that. I was like, any of those situations, I've set up my Bitcoin where it's basically impossible to get in situations of duress, whether I'm in the one under duress or someone I care about is under duress. I've just made it essentially impossible to get the Bitcoin under those circumstances. So I'm like, okay, good. So as soon as I transferred it to my incredibly, insanely difficult to get to cold storage, I felt a lot better. And I was like, good. Now I'm not 48 hours away from unlocking meaningful amounts of Bitcoin. I'm not playing the games from Coinbase or anybody else where they're basically bribing me into keeping assets on the platform. I'm just not going to play any of those games. So as soon as I transferred it to cold storage, I felt a whole lot better about everything. And yeah, that means I only get 2% instead of 4% on the Coinbase credit card. And I feel good about that. It's not worth having a large online balance that anyone can lock or freeze or that the government can take away. I mean, if you got assets on Coinbase, the government can freeze those assets. Coinbase can freeze those assets. Login snafus can mean that those assets are unavailable to you. There's just all this stuff that can happen that's bad on an online platform that doesn't happen with a service like Bitkey. Or it's not a service, with a product like Bitkey. bitkey.world is the website. bitkey.world. By far the best way to store Bitcoin for the long term. So I transferred it all to cold storage. I felt way better about all of it, and I thought, great, this is just the way it's supposed to be. And, I'm not going to be enticed by extra goodies. And when I did that transfer, it said, Coinbase popped up and said, by transferring this Bitcoin, you're losing $6,000. I was like, yes, I am. And then I knew, also, because it popped up and it was like, oh, by the way, as soon as you transfer this, you're also going to only get 2% instead of 4% on the Coinbase credit card, which again, I had calculated was going to add up to another $4,000 over, 2 or 3 years. So anyway, it's worth it. It's worth it to have the peace of mind and security of having your Bitcoin in cold storage, keeping nice low balances on Coinbase or River or anywhere else, and knowing that, look, your Bitcoin is impossible to get to for hackers and scammers, and, impossible to get to under duress, based on my recommendations for how you set that up, which my setup is way more complicated. The setup I recommend for most people is if you have more than $5,000 or $10,000 of Bitcoin, buy a Bitkey. And you can keep it anywhere, at your house anyway, because for $5,000 or $10,000, you're really just worried about hackers and scammers. And the Bitkey will keep the hackers and scammers from getting your Bitcoin regardless of where it is. If you have more than $50,000 of Bitcoin, I recommend you keep that Bitkey in a safe deposit box at a bank. Safe deposit box at a bank only costs $30 or $40 per year, not month, per year. And it means you can only move large amounts of Bitcoin by going to the bank and touching that Bitkey device to the back of your phone. Now, you can set up a daily spend limit, which means you can get to a certain amount of Bitcoin without going to the bank and touching your Bitkey to the back of your phone. So let's say you have $10,000 of Bitcoin and you've decided that, sometimes you might need a new repair for your car or whatever it is, or to pay off something. You could set a limit. You could say, look, I can pull out $500 or $1,000 a day without my BitKey, without actually touching it to the back of your phone. That also means if something bad happens, you get held up in a gas station parking lot, you're like, okay, sure, I'll give you $500 or $1,000 because that's all I can give you. Because to get more than that, you'd have to go to the bank. And I promise you, bad guys do not want to go to the bank with you. If they did, they would be going to the bank with people all the time to get money out of the bank. They don't do that because bad guys don't like to be in banks, because banks have security cameras and armed guards and little buttons that call the police and, all that sort of stuff that bad guys don't like. So anyway, in my case, I gave up $10,000 of free Bitcoin because I was not willing to play the game of having large balances on online services. I'm just not going to do that. I could have lost a lot more. I was playing around with FTX before it blew up. Thankfully, I had almost no Bitcoin on there, but a lot of people had a lot of Bitcoin on FTX when it blew up in 2022. It's just not worth it. Don't play those games. Get yourself a BitKey. Keep your Bitcoin in a BitKey. And in my case, I was willing to give up $10,000 of free Bitcoin because I was not going to play the games that took away my security, the security of my Bitcoin, and my peace of mind knowing that it was actually, truly, and really safe. So that's my advice. Buy yourself a BitKey. If you have more than $5,000 or $10,000 of Bitcoin, buy yourself a BitKey and use it. And if you have more than $50,000 of Bitcoin, keep that BitKey in a safe deposit box at a bank. It's cheap, it's effective, and then just set up a daily spend limit, and you can get a little bit of Bitcoin that way. Now look, also if you're worried that what if you set up a BitKey, you stick it in a safe deposit box at a bank, then you move and you forget it and you leave it behind. Well, there's ways with BitKey to replace it with a new BitKey after a security waiting period, or you can set up a daily spend limit. So if you got $25,000 in Bitcoin and you set up a daily spend limit of $2,500, then over the course of 10 days, you can slowly move that Bitcoin over to another account or to a new BitKey, whatever you want to do. But they have recovery options where you can replace the BitKey as long as you have access to your phone and your Apple iCloud account or your Google account. They've thought of everything. The BitKey device is genius. They thought of everything. I mean, it's just absolutely the perfect device. Every conceivable thing you could possibly think of that could go bad with you or your Bitcoin, whether it's the Palisades forest fires in California or, the bank with your BitKey burns down. They have backup options for all of that make it virtually impossible to lose your Bitcoin. In fact, I have never encountered anyone who has ever lost Bitcoin using BitKey. I know a bunch of people that have lost Bitcoin to hackers and scammers and account lockouts and stuff like that on Coinbase and other services, but never BitKey. BitKey is engineered to make sure your Bitcoin is safe and that nothing bad happens to it. So that's my advice, and I'm here to help and support in any way I can on your Bitcoin journey.